Welcome back to the program. The program. Welcome back. I hope everyone is doing well. I want to talk to you about the GATE program, the Gifted and Talented Education Program for Kids. I've been doing a lot of work, work, inner searching, seeking to understand my own story, like all of us are doing or should do. And I have dots that I still needed to connect. So I've been doing a lot of work to discover these things. And I have figured something out about the GATE program that nobody else has figured out. So be sure that you stay tuned for this entire video because you're not going to believe it. And there's a lot to unpack. So if you don't already have your glass of iced tea or your cup of coffee or whatever your preference of drink is, by all means, pause right now. Go get it, get your bathroom break, whatever you got to do, because we're going to get into this. There's a lot here about me and you that I'm going to help all of you to understand. So I want to begin with a specific man named Stanley Kefner. Stanley Kefner worked for the Monroe Institute. He was on the board of the Monroe Institute. He was also on the board of the World Council of Gifted and Talented Children. World, okay? Keep that in mind. And yes, that also means that he was connected with the CIA because he worked for the Monroe Institute and was on the board there. Not everything that the CIA did or does is bad. Matter of fact, the majority of the people that work for the CIA are very good people and they have very good intentions. Sometimes they just don't go about it the moral or proper way. So, with that being said, the GATE experiment was something that happened in public schools all across the US, but also across the world. China had it, Russia had it, many countries did this. It actually began as early as 1936 ish, from what I can find in my research. And almost every child within the schools of their choice were tested on the preliminary level. So many of you may remember um, the cards or the hearing test or whatever that they did and drinking the pink drink and that kind of stuff. But it didn't stop there. That was simply the preliminary test to find the psychic children. And the reason that they were looking for the psychic children was not as nefarious as everyone would have you believe. The true conspiracy here is that our government knew something about the bad aliens that they were trying to thwart. And this actually fits with my entire story of my life, of me being a volunteer, of you being a volunteer or a starseed. So stick around because I am getting ready to connect your dots and mine. Okay, so all of this began with the state aptitude tests. Do you remember those? All of the schools across the United States and likely Canada and Europe and Russia and China and Germany and all over the place, right? They were giving these state aptitude tests. Now, some people who talk about the GATE program will lead you to believe that this is because of a Cold War, a space race kind of a thing. But it's not like that at all. It's kind of like that, but not in the way that they're thinking. And I'll get to that too. So, all schools nationwide, worldwide, likely, had these aptitude tests that they would do every year to see how well the school was doing teaching the kids, is what we were told the aptitude tests were for. But really, it was almost like a lottery, if you will, to see which schools they would choose to go to test the children for the GATE program. Now, the test that they gave in the schools was not the GATE program. Again, it was preliminary testing to see where we were at. And interestingly enough, in their findings, and this is actually in declassified CIA material and on the website called Journal of Scientific Exploration.org, you can find this information published by Stanley Kefner, as well as the books that he wrote, a volume of 10 books. The name of the book escapes me. I'll find it in my notes, and if I don't say it in the video, I'll post it in the description. He has 9 or 10 volume books, I think 10, where he actually wrote books and published his findings on this. And the last one was actually published in 2021 or 2023. So this was an ongoing thing. It did not stop in the 80s. It did not stop in the 90s. It did not stop in the early 2000s. It was continuous. Okay. But we'll get to that too. So these aptitude tests were done yearly to gain insight into which schools to choose for the initial testing or experimentation, if you will. After you were in the program, what I called the white coats would come to get you for a few hours during your school day or preschool, because mine began in preschool. And they would take you either in a white van or the short bus to a different location for your further education. Several of the children that were taken from the schools into these programs were actually the handicapped children, or the ones with learning disabilities, autism, ADHD, any type of handicap, or, back in the day, they would call it retardation, right? A lot of those children actually scored very high on the initial tests because they were not as physically in the body as everybody else, right? Especially by the time we started school. Because by then, your programming society, your parents, whoever, had told you, those voices that you hear aren't real, ghosts aren't real, you're not really seeing that. All of this stuff that children talk about, because we see through the veils easier when we're kids, was dumbed down or watered down to where when we did see it or experience it, either we didn't tell anyone or we kept it to ourselves. I mean, we would convince ourselves it wasn't real. But the handicapped children and the ones with the learning disabilities, they didn't have that same type of comprehension to the societal programming, right? So they weren't as susceptible to that. And they're already not as firmly grounded in the physical, because they're going by their other senses that we're all naturally born with, some just more than others. And I'll get to exactly why and who that is. So that's why sometimes it was the short buses and sometimes it was white vans. Because sometimes the majority of the children in the group were the handicapped children, and other times not so much. Personally, I was in the white vans and on the short buses. That's how I know for sure that there was both. So they would be taken to another location and educated further. Okay. Now, no harm was come to me in any of my memories that I have, even in the new ones that are surfacing at this time. No harm ever came to me. Okay. I just want to put that out there right away. Like physical harm. There were things done that you would consider morally wrong, okay, to do to children. Number one, we were taken off of school property, and likely our parents didn't know. I have found some research that says otherwise, though, that says that the parents did agree. They just didn't really understand fully what they were agreeing to. They thought it was simple testing just to see how smart we were or whatever, you know. Um, so these children, they were trained in various techniques, and a lot of these techniques actually began with inducing anxiety in the child in various forms. So some of that did include drinking the pink liquid, and it would create almost hallucinogenic or euphoric sensations in the child. Different ways that they were testing to move you further out of the body, okay, to astrally rise up and step out of the body. So there were 5 main goals to this. The first one was teaching a behavioral override, being able to deal with any scenario, any situation that you're faced with. So coping skills, right? The second one was pain disassociation, right? Mind over matter, teaching you that pain cannot prevent you from doing whatever it is that you need to do, whether it's survival or otherwise. Okay. So pain disassociation was the second one. The third one was teaching imagination and visualization. So again, this is where like the drug inducing things would come in, or anxiety inducing imagery would be shown to us, or very fast flashing light to induce anxiety and such, because it would actually trigger the pineal gland or the psyche to step outside of itself, and then you actually can see more and sense more. Okay, so it was that heightened awareness thing that was the goal for all of this. The fourth one was teaching you yourself how to understand the psyche and how the psyche can be cracked, it can be damaged, it can be healed, and it can be used as a tool. So a lot of people, for example, that I know that are star seeds or volunteers or whatever, that likely were part of this GATE program. Ironically, they also took like Psych 101 in school, or they somehow know about Psych 101 and 102 or 202, whatever it's called, and sociology, and they understand behavioral disorders. They understand a lot of things in depth in this way. And likely it was because you were taught this as a child and you just don't remember being taught that as a child. And that could have also, made you interested in then taking those classes in high school or college or whatever as well. And then the fifth one is teaching you high tolerance to medication. So this is to teach you the mind over matter again, and able to override the body systems that would otherwise alter you or prevent you from achieving your goal. Okay. So a lot of these people have a very high tolerance for medication. They understand the psyche and human behavior, um, sociology, things like that. They have a very high tolerance for pain. They have the ability to stay cool, calm, and collected in any situation, including like a hostage situation. They would automatically know like how to navigate that and maneuver through that and get out of it, which I have done. In my early 20s, I had a gun put to my head by a really bad boyfriend, and I knew exactly how to navigate through that instantaneously, and I did. And after it was all over and I had um, lowered the tempers of the moment, and it was all completely done, I was like, how the hell did I know how to do that? And then I did it again with friends or family who were threatening to harm themselves and had a weapon, and I talked them down. I talked them off the ledge, if you will. And I knew exactly what to do, and I just jumped right into motion of doing it without even a second thought. I just immediately took charge, okay? Which Interestingly, I'm going to get to later, is another one of the things that they look for in the initial testing is leadership skills. Okay. And there's a reason for that. Okay. So all of these 5 things that I have listed, that are the initial training of the various techniques that the children will go through, is the doorway or the gateway. Okay. Which is exactly what the Monroe Institute program is called. It's called the Gateway program. So they're teaching you the initial steps, the baby steps, if you will, to be able to go to the further education, which is the Gateway program. So we start out as GATE kids, where they're teaching the gifted and talented education to the children. And then you graduate from that, if you do well, you graduate from that into the Gateway program because you've learned to unlock doors within you. Now, some people will say that this has a lot to do with eugenics, and they say that in a very nefarious, negative designation. So I want to clarify that for everyone, because this is something that I clearly understand now about these children in the GATE program, and children and adults who have an easier access to their psychic abilities than the rest of us, even though we are all born with it. And this is like a eugenics thing, but it's not like they're tinkering with eugenics and trying to create some perfect person. They're actually looking for the psychic children. So eugenics in that sense, right? They're looking for the children who have these abilities, okay? And the main precursor to this typically is that they're looking for Rh positive blood type. Rh positive, not Rh negative. And a lot of you are familiar with, like in the UFO field, and talking about abductions and people being able to have special abilities and stuff. They really push that Rh negative narrative, which I have always been adamantly against. I know for a fact that it's not just Rh negative people, because I'm not Rh negative, I'm Rh positive. And I am very gifted and talented in my abilities. And so I knew that that was wrong for them to be pushing that. I just didn't understand why yet. The thing is that the reason they're looking for the Rh positive is because they're looking for the ones who still carry the DNA genetic traits of our ancestors, of our original humans, because those are the ones that were made in the God's, plural, image, who do have the natural innate connection to the cosmos, the natural innate connection to collective consciousness, to the quantum field, to the Akashic record. It's the original humans that they're looking for, the ones that were before the tampering of the other alien or NHI, the nefarious ones, the ones that the black hats work with, who came here and tampered with our DNA and turned off a bunch of our DNA. And even the Rh positive people, yes, there's a lot of that DNA that was turned off, but that's the thing about the Rh positive, is that some of it wasn't able to be shut off. So that access to this quantum field was easier for those people. Or if you had a parent that encouraged you to use psychic ability, it didn't matter your blood type, you could still access it, because we literally all have this ability. It's just laying dormant within a lot of us. And if you look back in history and the history of blood work, blood types, Rh positive used to be the norm, and Rh negative was very, very rare. and they did not understand where it was coming from. Now we have the majority of the population of the planet is Rh negative rather than Rh positive. And the nefarious reason there had nothing to do with our CIA, had nothing to do with our governments of our world. It had everything to do with the aliens that came here that wanted to claim dominion over our planet and us and tried to claim us as being created by them. But we weren't created by them. We were just tinkered with. They shut off our DNA. And I actually know this as a fact as well from being part of the Order of the Melchizedek, because this is what I teach to my students in my classes, my workshops, and my courses, is how to activate your 12-strand DNA and turn it back on, how to activate your 144 fire codes that lay dormant within you that they shut off so that you can access all of what's in you, regardless of your blood type. We all have it because we're all human, and it's part of our human ancestry. So that's what they were looking for. The ones that could obtain the old knowledge, the ancient knowledge, the ancient abilities easier. And that explains why I was always very strongly psychic. It had nothing to do with being special or being hybrid or being alien or any of those things that people want to pitch out there to create division. It just didn't work. What they were trying to do didn't work in my family's DNA. And even with that being said, again, back to if you are Rh negative, it doesn't mean you're not capable of it. It doesn't mean that your family doesn't have it in them, because the whole family is not Rh negative. I guarantee you've got an Rh positive in there somewhere. It's just that the less you have of the Rh positive in your family tree, the more work you're going to have to do to unlock it. But I offer courses and classes and workshops to help you to do that. So no division, right? No need for division. Because we are all psychic, and being able to use this means using more of this information to make informed decisions in your everyday life, your everyday scenarios. So, a lot of people would say, what's the point in being psychic? Who cares? But it actually matters a lot. Otherwise, why did the aliens tinker with our DNA to shut it all off? They didn't want us to be able to connect to the gods and the other beings and our deceased loved ones. They didn't want us to know that there's more to this world than the little box of a narrative that they wanted to pack us in so that they could control us and enslave us, which they have done for thousands of years. And it keeps us confused and fearful and feeling like we're missing something and trapped. It literally keeps us trapped. Well, from what I've learned in my research and in my internal work recently, this is new revelations within the past few weeks. The CIA actually figured that out. This explains to me better why my dad was part of that faction that was separate from these others that did the MK Ultra stuff, and how they were sort of doing the same thing, had the same agenda in a way, except this was a negative agenda and this was a better agenda. This was for the betterment of mankind, our country and mankind, but also this was a worldwide thing. And these people over here wanted the psychic kids to use them for nefarious reasons, weaponize them. So that explains to me why my dad was like guiding me and my brother the other direction. But so the CIA figured this out, and so the point here is that not everything the CIA does is nefarious or evil. Okay, even though again, a lot of it is morally wrong. No question about it. They should have never subjected children to the type of methods or the approach that they chose to use, for any of us. But in 1958, we had a National Defense Education Act signed into law. And the sole purpose of this was to create minds that are capable of defending our nation. This was not about the space race or the Cold War, as people would have you believe. It was because of what they had learned about space and these nefarious aliens that had been coming here. The first contact began with ET or NHI telling our world leaders that they were who created us. So this was the catalyst for keeping aliens a secret from our nation and the world to begin with. They had determined that this would likely crash the economy, dismantle religion, and create fear and panic in everyone. Well, Kennedy had found this out, and he really adamantly felt like this was absolutely wrong and wanted to tell us, the public, the truth about aliens and their presence here. And unfortunately, there were other people who vehemently disagreed with him for whatever reasons. It could have been the MK Ultra CIA. It could have been the Gate Program CIA. It could have been both of them united that agreed that this was a bad idea. Personally, I feel like it was the MK Ultra type black hats, that were the ones that planned to take him out. But they wanted to keep him quiet on aliens, and there's no doubt in my mind that that's what was the catalyst for his assassination. Yet behind the scenes, there was a plan, both by the military and by good ETs who are actually related to us. They're our family, if you will. That devised a plan to help give us the tools to be able to overthrow the bad ETs and their plans, their future plans for us, which actually fits into my remembering that I'm a volunteer for something that would happen that's called the Great Awakening, and others. It makes a lot of sense that this plan was devised here before I was ever even born, and I heard the call to help make sure that we pull this off without a hitch. And they had to start with the children. They had to start with teaching them no fear, teaching them resilience, teaching them endurance, motivation, many different types of skills, accuracy, problem solving, fast reflex, weaponry, and spiritual warfare, spiritual attunement, and spiritual warfare. Because this is a war that we're in. It's a war for our souls. It's a war for our planet. It's a war for our life. So just think Gen Z or Gen X kids to the ninth, right, on steroids. The enemy is not another country. It's the hacking of our mind and our very essence of our DNA, our birthright. And it's still going on today with synthetic RNA being introduced into drug treatments and even into vaccinations. The bad guys, they're the ones that took over the SRA cards and the education system, McGraw-Hill, who, interestingly enough, is Robert Maxwell, directly correlates to every bit of this, and how they were trying to create a programming on the children to dumb them down and keep them from thinking for themselves. And Robert Maxwell is, if anyone doesn't know, Ghislaine Maxwell's father. Her sister was also very instrumental in working with the black hats and the bad factions of our alphabet agencies and such. So then the National Defense Education Initiative uh, was fully funded for all of the 50 states across the United States, all of their public schools. And the testing was done to target the children specifically for potential abilities in any of the 6 following areas. The first being general intelligence or intellectual abilities. The second is specific academic aptitude testing. The third was creative and productive thinking to enable problem solving, quick thinking type of stuff. Fourth was leadership abilities. Fifth was visual performing arts, because basically sometimes you got to fake it out of any situation that you're faced with. And then 6 was psychomotor abilities. And they went into this initiative with the understanding and the assumption that at minimum it would be 3 to 5% of the school population that would have, of the children that would have these abilities, that they could then provide them with the advanced learning and develop the abilities listed above, as well as develop their psychic abilities further. Then we had the No Child Left Behind Act and the Patriot Act that was enabled by the 80s and 90s. All levels of government could access a database of American children who've ever been in public school or a public preschool system. They literally were able to track and um, correlate all children from preschool through college in their grades, their aptitude, their behavior, their attendance. Gen X and Gen Z were specifically targeted because they were going to be at the right age to make a difference when the time comes, which we are. And some, if you were exemplary in your results, were even tracked into adulthood through their careers, their behavior at work, their attendance, their aptitude, etc. Though this is not the same thing as um, a sleeper cell, if you will, like with MK Ultra. We are sort of like an ace up the sleeve or a sleeper cell because we don't fully remember yet. We don't have full recall yet, all of us. And so this Great Awakening is the time that we begin to connect the dots, see the conspiracies as truths, the religions as ways to keep us disconnected from God and Source, and the willingness to do something about all of it. Together, we will wake others up. Together, we will change the world. Together, we will right all of the wrongs. Together, we will shine the light on all of the dark places because we are who we've been waiting for. And for me personally, and likely others who will listen to this video, this is how I ended up in a psychic program later on that involved spying for our government, remote viewing locations, many things that I remember doing for our government. But my tasks weren't what you would call earthly governments that I was spying upon or reading their energy. I would read energy, thoughts, etc. from NHI or aliens, their leaders, their diplomats, to gauge their honesty or their covert plans and agendas that maybe they weren't being so forthright and honest about with our diplomats and our military leaders and so on. So I would go to these meetings with like a council, if you will, as a page or an assistant. I would go there with the American leaders who were sent to be the person to represent us. And I was like their little ace up their sleeve because I was barely noticed. I was dismissed among many as very unimportant. And even the most psychic of the beings that were there rarely suspected me. And if they did, never, ever did any of them penetrate my firewall in my mind to really see who I was and why I was there. Even if they had a slight hint, they would come look at me a little closer. They still wouldn't be able to like figure out what it was. They would shrug it off and be like, that was weird. I don't know what that was about, because they couldn't get into my mind. Um, Also, I had a different identity as this liaison or page. Um, that it was only until recently I didn't really fully understand that. I have very vivid memories of being taken aboard the ship, as I often was, the same ship that I would say I would refer to them as my family and my teachers. They would bring me aboard, even as a child, and we would sit in a group room, us children, and learn telekinesis and telepathy and all sorts of stuff like that. And I was taken aboard this craft one time, but I was walked to another end of the craft, and as we came down this long corridor to my left, um, they stopped with me, and they, turned to their left, and I looked, and down both sides of this corridor were these things. The best way I can describe them is they look like a bank chute, right? At the drive-through at the bank. It looked like a bank chute, except, human size, and they were all full of bodies. And the very first one on the left, they told me is my body. This is you. This is the body that you use. And I didn't understand that at first. I was assuming that this must be what I looked like when I volunteered to come to Earth to incarnate. They just plucked me right up out of that body and put it in stasis, and that body's waiting for me to come back to. But that's actually not the case there. This body is the body that they would take my consciousness out of and place it into this avatar body when I would go on these missions as a liaison page or assistant with our military and our diplomats. That was the body that I used as a psychic spy, if you will. Um, and I'm just now starting to piece that together, just in the past few weeks with this deep dive trance meditation I've been doing and hypnosis therapies to help me to recall more of my memories, because I wanted to understand this gate program better, and I wanted to understand, like that scene better that was in my memories stuff. So I've come to the understanding that I was in some type of a 20 and back type program myself. I don't know if that's what it was called because I was a psychic spy. That was my task. Like the entire however length of time I was there, that was my task, was to use my psychic abilities to read energy and navigate through things, or to look into an area before troops went in to make sure that it was going to be safe or clear, or whatever. So my job was to be a psychic, and that explains why I had this different identity from my physical identity that I have as me, Kelly, right? Um, and that particular avatar, for anyone who wants to know, was approximately 25 to 30 years old, dark complected, Caucasian, but very dark complected, blonde, long blonde hair, and blue eyes. And she wore a blue jumpsuit, like a pale silvery blue uh, form-fitting jumpsuit that zipped up the front, and on the left breast had like a chevron and then a triangle shape underneath of the chevron. Um, so realizing this for me actually helped me to understand why, as a child, I felt like I had lived this double life, and that made no sense to me. And why I wondered why my eyes weren't blue anymore, and staring up at the sky and wanting to go back to home, whatever I thought was home. I don't think I was actually longing for the Taygeta star system per se, because my big thing was I didn't want to have to do school again. And if I was in some kind of 20 and back program, that makes sense that they actually, take you back to where they removed you from. And so then you got to do a redo type of thing. That's a whole weird thing to understand and be able to wrap your mind around, because I lived that life, and my parents were there and everybody was there and we all lived that life, but my consciousness was actually in this other body doing this other life. So then they got to rewind all that and do it all over again. And I don't fully understand that part yet, and I don't pretend to. That's still a work in progress. Um, but it also explains why, as a little kid, I would look at my body and I would be like, why do I have this little kid body? And where's my boobs? And I would think the craziest things, and my mother would be just like, you're just talking nonsense, but it makes more sense to me now that I felt that way about so much stuff very strongly. I felt that way. Um, and now that all these memories are coming back through doing the inner work, through doing the shadow work, the hypnosis sessions, the trance meditation, and with talking with the custodians, I'm beginning to fully remember who I am and who I was. Um, that's not to say that I didn't volunteer to incarnate here. It's just that this too is a part of that agreement, as is with many of us starseeds. And the only difference is you don't have your total or almost total recall yet. But as the work is done, the inner work, and help from others who know how to help you find those memories and pull them out, and also as the veils thin, more of your story is going to begin to fit. Your dots will connect, and it will help you to fully understand and integrate into exactly who you are, just as I have done and am still in the process of doing. So I'm sure you have lots of questions, and I'm ready for every one of them. I will answer them to the very best of my ability. And if I don't know, I'm honestly going to tell you I don't know. I don't make things up. I don't pull stuff out of my butt. If I don't know, I don't say. And everybody that knows me well knows that I don't. I won't say a word about it if I don't know anything about it. I'll just say I don't know, because that's who I am. I don't want to mislead anyone. And I'm definitely not here to try to pretend to be anything that I'm not. All I want to do is embrace exactly who I am. And that's what I want for all of us. And so I truly hope that this message reaches the right people, the ones who still needed some dots connected, who still needed to understand why they experienced the GATE program, and maybe even understand how far did you go in it or not, and that it wasn't nefarious. It wasn't something that they were doing that was horrible to us, that we have to be afraid of digging further into our memories and pulling out that recall. It's not nefarious. It's not dangerous. We weren't tortured. We weren't molested. We weren't anything that was horrible, right? So I sincerely hope that this was educational, entertaining, interesting, and above and beyond everything else, helpful. And I'll see you again soon.